Most Penkridge people are familiar with this map of the main streets of the village in olden times. The page, however, is just one small part of a much larger work. A book of all the land belonging to Sir Edward Littleton in 1754. This book has 11 very large pages covering nearly 8,000 acres of land in and around Penkridge, and has preserved several thousand ancient field names. Unfortunately, this book of maps is now so frail that it is not made available to visitors to the Staffordshire Record Office, and we have to make do with a black and white photocopy, which itself is old, murky and illegible in places. Being so large, it is difficult to photograph and keep in focus, and has to be held flat by round lead weights. This map, just part of a larger page, shows the fields around Wolgarston. The Cannock Road in yellow runs across the top. The Blue River Penk flows on the right hand side. The Teddesley Road, that part of Penkridge Marsh we now call Little Marsh, and Quarry Heath are highlighted in red. And, in blue, the line of the canal, yet to be built when the map was drawn in 1754. What is missing from this map is any sense of order. It looks like a jumble of fields with few patterns or indications that conform to our modern ideas of a farm. But if we check the reference book to the map to find the tenants of these fields in 1754, a pattern does emerge. The area of the modern Wolgarston farm was tenanted mainly by three men: John Bate, Michael Goodall and Thomas Deavy. None of them, however, seem to have a house or significant farm buildings on their holdings. Now, looking at just part of the area in close-up, we can see more clearly the names of the fields in 1754. We can legitimately assume that most of the names were already very old in 1754, and that these names, often deriving from the Old English language of the Anglo-Saxons, tell us something of the nature of fields and farming in those days. For example, three of the fields have the seemingly quaint names of Ladystock, the Stockings and Near Stockings. However, far from being connected to items of ladies' clothing, the names refer to land with tree stumps left standing in them, a reference back to the rough, tough days of pioneering farming, when productive arable land had to be hacked out of the primeval wild wood. Eight field names contain the word furlong. This is a clear sign that this area was once part of one of the vast open fields from medieval times, which formed the open field or three-field system that we learnt about at school. The furlongs were subdivisions of the open fields, which contained long, narrow strips, 220 yards long and 22 yards wide. There were at least 10 open fields in and around Penkridge. Only one example of the open field system remains in England today, much reduced in size, in Laxton in Nottinghamshire. A very old map survives, showing Laxton in its full open field glory. Here we see several hundred strips. It is clear that, although there are a few hedges as boundary markers, the strips were divided into oblong groups, which were called furlongs. Old photographs of Laxton show what the open field system looked like on the ground. Returning to the theme of rough, tough farming times, the two breaks fields refer to land covered with bracken and help to complete a picture of hard pioneering times at Wolgarston, with difficult land to clear between Penkridge Marsh and Quarry Heath. This leaves us with a group of 3 fields with the names Hollywells, Middle Hollywell and Big Hollywells. Here seen highlighted in yellow, and about which more later. About 90 years later, Lord Hatherton commissioned a new set of maps for his estate. These reveal a massive change in attitude to the estate. It was no longer regarded as a vast collection of small fields, loosely and temporarily identified with the sitting tenant, but as a group of large farms with desirable houses and buildings. This change was almost entirely due to Sir Edward Littleton, who, from 1749 to 1812, consolidated the fields and merged them into large farms that could provide both profit for the estate and a decent living for talented farmers using scientific methods. The map of 1847 shows that the fields we have been studying were now firmly identified as belonging to Wolgarston Farm, with its impressive house and buildings. The small fields have been merged and some names changed. The Hollywells retained their original shape and names, but were not part of Wolgarston Farm. The map also shows how Wolgarston Farm extended over the Cannock Road and tells us that Wolgarston School was built on Kiln Field. I would have left the story of Wolgarston Fields at that point if I had not come across a small story in an 1891 edition of the Staffordshire Advertiser. In June 1891, Henry Fiddler was found drowned in a ditch leading from a spring on Wolgarston Farm. The paper said the deceased had gone to the place for water to bathe his grandchild's eyes, the water there being supposed to have curative properties, hence the spring is known by the name Holy Water. So Hollywell was in fact Holywell, and the field names from the 1754 map reveal a local religious cult or superstition, presumably existing before the Reformation and possibly back to Anglo-Saxon and pagan times, and lasted until the dawn of the 20th century. The distinctive shape of the three fields was still evident on the 1901 Ordnance Survey map. However, the late 20th century was not to be kind to them. As this map transforms into a 21st century satellite photograph, we can see the Hollywells and the Middle Hollywells being lost to the Cherrybrook estate. And the big Hollywells being cut in two by the M6. The developers of the Cherrybrook estate clearly saw no reason to acknowledge the pretty and historic names that they built over, thus depriving the village of a link with their past. Now in 2018, the larger part of the big Hollywells is under threat. If the valiant campaigners do not succeed in preventing the construction of 80 to 100 houses on the field, then perhaps the least we could hope for is that in the naming of the newer housing estate, some of its roads might reflect this ancient part of Penkridge's history.